I thought I'd freeze to death that night. The rain was pouring, the streets were empty, and I had no one to call. Then, out of the storm, a man appeared. His coat covered me, his eyes burned into mine, and he whispered, "You're mine now." Before I tell you how my life changed forever that stormy night, make sure you stick with me till the end, because this story has twists you won't see coming. If you love powerful love stories filled with pain, betrayal, and second chances, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss more stories like this. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. When I was just an ordinary woman caught in the storm of her life, I've always believed that storms don't just happen in the sky, they happen in our lives too. And before the storm that changed my life forever, I was already living inside one. My name doesn't matter as much as my story, but what you need to know is that I was just an ordinary black woman, trying to hold my world together with bare hands. Most days started before the sun came up. I worked long hours at a job that barely paid enough to cover rent and bills. I counted coins at the grocery store. I stretched meals so they would last the week, and I kept telling myself that this struggle was only temporary, that one day, all the long nights and empty pockets would lead me somewhere better. But on the inside, there were days I felt like my dreams were slipping further and further away. I wasn't the type to depend on anyone. Independence was the one thing I clung to, even when it broke me. I had learned the hard way that putting your heart in someone else's hands could cost you more than money. It could cost you pieces of yourself. I'd loved before, trusted before, and ended up alone with nothing but unanswered questions and a heart that took forever to heal. And even though I told myself I had moved on, the truth is, I carried that heartbreak everywhere I went, like a shadow I couldn't shake. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit by my window and stare at the city lights. I'd imagine myself living a different life, a life where I didn't have to worry if the rent was late or if my heart was safe. In those quiet moments, I dreamed of love that didn't hurt, of a partner who wouldn't leave when things got hard. I dreamed of freedom, of safety, of being seen for more than my struggles. But reality has a way of silencing dreams. My world was made up of bills, broken promises, and a loneliness I didn't want to admit out loud. People around me thought I was strong, and I was, but strength doesn't erase emptiness. I smiled when I was supposed to, laughed when people expected me to, but behind closed doors, I prayed for something, anything, that would make me feel alive again. Looking back now, I think life has a cruel but beautiful way of preparing you. It breaks you down before it builds you back up. It leaves you standing in the rain before it lets the sun shine on you again. At the time, I didn't know it, but every quiet tear I cried, every long day I worked, every lonely night I endured, it was leading me to the storm. And not just the storm that raged in the sky that night, but the storm that would bring him into my life. Fate has a way of hiding in the shadows until the moment it's ready to strike. And on that night, as the clouds gathered and the winds began to rise, fate was waiting for me too. That night, the sky felt heavier than usual, as if it had been holding in its tears for too long. I remember staring up, watching dark clouds swallow the last trace of daylight, and feeling like the weather was mirroring my own life. I had just finished a long shift, exhausted and drained, and all I wanted was to get home, curl up under a blanket, and forget the world for a while. But fate had other plans. My old car had been coughing for weeks, but I prayed it would make it through just one more night. Of course, it didn't. A block away from the highway, the engine gave a final sputter and went silent. I sat there in disbelief, gripping the wheel as the first drops of rain splashed against the windshield. I tried to restart it, once, twice, but nothing. The rain fell harder, the kind that soaks you to the bone in seconds, and thunder cracked overhead like the sky itself was angry. I stepped out, clutching my thin jacket tighter, the cold instantly cutting through me. The streets were almost empty, everyone rushing to shelter while I was stranded in the middle of nowhere. Street lights flickered like weak candles. The wind whipped my hair into my face, and my shoes filled with water as I tried to push the car to the side of the road. My strength gave out, and I stood there trembling, my body and spirit both tired. It's funny. When you're alone in a storm, time feels slower. Every raindrop is louder, every shadow deeper. I shivered, my teeth chattering, thinking, this is it. This is the night I finally break. I felt invisible, forgotten, just another woman lost in the storm. And then, just as I was about to give up, headlights cut through the darkness. The car that pulled up was nothing like mine. Sleek, black, and powerful, it rolled to a stop beside me. For a moment, fear pricked my skin. Was this safe? Should I trust a stranger on a night like this? But before I could step back, the door opened and he stepped out. Even in the rain, he looked like he belonged to another world. Tall, steady, unbothered by the chaos around him. His coat was heavy, rich, and warm-looking, and without a word, he draped it over my shaking shoulders. The scent of him, clean, expensive, intoxicating, washed over me. I lifted my eyes to meet his, and there was something in his gaze I couldn't explain, something that cut through the storm like it was nothing. "You're mine now," he said quietly, as if it wasn't a choice, but a truth that had already been decided. My breath caught. In that moment, soaked and shivering, part of me wanted to resist, to question, but another part, the tired, lonely, forgotten part, wanted to believe him. I didn't know it then, but that night in the storm was only the beginning. The moment I slid into his car, I felt like I'd stepped into another universe. The leather seats were soft, the air warm, and the silence inside was almost unreal compared to the chaos outside. My wet clothes clung to me, and I tried to shrink into myself, not wanting to ruin anything in a place that clearly wasn't meant for someone like me. He didn't speak much at first, just drove with a calmness that made me nervous. Every so often, I'd steal glances at him. The way his hands gripped the wheel, steady and sure. The way his jaw tightened, like he was lost in his own storm, one that had nothing to do with the weather. There was something unreadable about him, something both intimidating and magnetic. When he finally asked where I lived, my voice came out smaller than I intended. I gave him my address, embarrassed to admit where it was. My apartment wasn't in the best neighborhood, and part of me braced for judgment. But he didn't flinch, didn't sneer. He just nodded and kept driving, as though the details of my life didn't scare him away. The ride felt like a dream I wasn't sure I belonged in. Everything about him screamed wealth. The quiet hum of the car, the faint scent of something expensive in the air, even the watch on his wrist that probably cost more than my rent for a year. And then there was me, soaked, broke, and trying to piece my life back together. The gap between us felt like an entire ocean. When we pulled up in front of my building, I almost wished the ride could last longer. The safety of that car, the warmth of his coat, the way his presence silenced my worries for just a little while. It was something I hadn't felt in years. He looked at me then, his eyes steady, almost daring me to look away. "You shouldn't be walking in storms alone," he said softly. "You shouldn't be living like this." His words pierced me. They weren't cruel, but they reminded me of everything I had been fighting to ignore. That my independence came at a cost, that loneliness had become my normal, that I had grown so used to surviving that I had forgotten what it felt like to simply live. I wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't know me, didn't understand my struggles. But instead, I sat there in silence, my heart pounding. There was something about him, something in his presence, that made me feel both seen and exposed. When I finally stepped out of the car, the storm was still raging, but I wasn't shivering anymore. I clutched his coat tighter around me, feeling its weight, his warmth lingering in the fabric. For the first time in a long time, I wondered if fate was trying to tell me something, that maybe the storm wasn't just an ending, but the beginning of something I couldn't yet see. For days after that night, I couldn't stop thinking about him. The way he appeared in the storm, the weight of his coat on my shoulders, the certainty in his voice when he said, "You're mine now." It echoed in my mind like a promise I didn't know if I wanted to believe. He didn't disappear like I half expected him to. Instead, he called. He showed up. He kept finding excuses to see me, to take me places, to make me feel like maybe I wasn't invisible anymore. At first, I fought it. I told myself men like him didn't stay. Men like him didn't choose women like me. But little by little, he chipped away at the walls I'd built. And then he invited me into his world. The first time I walked into one of his gatherings, I felt my knees weaken. It was like stepping into a movie scene. Crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, women in gowns that shimmered like water, men in suits that probably cost more than my yearly salary. Everyone looked flawless, confident, untouchable. And then there was me, in the best dress I owned, still feeling like a child trying on her mother's shoes. At first, he never let go of my hand. His presence was steady, grounding, but I felt the stares. I heard the whispers, laughter that stopped when I walked past, eyes that lingered a little too long, measuring me, deciding I didn't belong. It only took one moment for the illusion to crack. A woman, tall and elegant, with the kind of beauty that makes people turn their heads, approached us. She smiled at him like they shared a history I couldn't touch. And then she looked at me, really looked at me, and her smile turned sharp. "She's not one of us," she said lightly, almost like a joke, but loud enough for others to hear. "You could do better." The words burned more than I expected. I had told myself I was strong, that I didn't care about their world, that I would never let anyone make me feel small again. But standing there, surrounded by glittering perfection, I felt exposed, like all my scars were visible under the bright lights. He tightened his grip on my hand, his jaw hardening. "She's exactly where she belongs," he said firmly. But even as his words wrapped around me like protection, doubt had already started to creep in. Later that night, when it was just the two of us, he tried to reassure me. He told me he didn't care about what anyone thought, that I mattered more than their opinions. And for a moment, I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't forget the way their eyes had sliced through me, the way their whispers had made me feel like an intruder in his world. It was the first time I realized that love with him wouldn't just be about the two of us. It would be about fighting an entire world that had already decided I wasn't worthy of standing beside him. And in that realization, something inside me broke just a little. After that night, I couldn't shake the weight of their words. No matter how much he tried to shield me, I felt like a stranger in his world. I started pulling back, answering his calls with hesitation, questioning his intentions, and wondering if this was all just a fleeting distraction for him. Maybe I was just a phase, a storm he'd weather and then forget. But he didn't let me disappear. He showed up at my door one evening, uninvited but not unwelcome, with that same look in his eyes, the one that both unnerved and anchored me. He didn't start with charm or promises this time. Instead, he sat down, heavy, like he was carrying a truth too big to hold any longer. "There's something you need to know," he said quietly. I braced myself. In my mind, I prepared for the worst. Another woman, a hidden family, some secret that would break whatever fragile hope I'd built. But what he told me wasn't scandalous in the way I expected. It was something deeper. He hadn't just found me that stormy night. He had seen me before. He told me about the evenings he'd spotted me walking home from work, the times he'd watched me from a distance, not in a way that felt threatening, but like someone who was drawn to something they couldn't explain. He had noticed me long before the storm, the way I carried myself, even when life weighed heavy, the quiet strength I didn't realize anyone else could see. He confessed that he had wanted to approach me so many times, but something always stopped him. And then, that night, when he saw me in the rain, stranded and trembling, he decided fate had made the choice for him. "You think I saved you," he said, his voice steady. "But the truth is, you've been saving me for a long time. You just didn't know it." His words hit me harder than any insult ever could. This man, who had everything, who lived in a world of excess and power, was admitting that he felt empty. He spoke about the loneliness of his life, the shallow conversations, the endless parties that meant nothing. He told me that his wealth built walls around him, not bridges, and that somehow, in seeing me, he had found something real. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to believe every word, to let it heal the doubt gnawing at me. Another part wondered if love built on secrets could survive. But looking into his eyes, I saw no games, no masks, just a man stripped bare of everything except truth. And in that moment, I realized his words in the storm weren't a command, but a confession. "You're mine now" wasn't about possession. It was about desperation, a plea to hold on to something, to someone who could remind him what it meant to truly live. It scared me, it moved me, and it left me standing at the edge of a choice I wasn't sure I was ready to make. For days after his confession, I couldn't stop replaying his words. "You think I saved you, but the truth is, you've been saving me for a long time." I had never imagined a man like him, wealthy, powerful, untouchable, could carry the same kind of emptiness I had felt for years. His world looked flawless from the outside, but beneath it all, he was just as human, just as broken, just as hungry for something real as I was. Still, fear clung to me. Loving him meant stepping into a life where I would always be judged, where whispers and sharp glances would try to cut me down. It meant opening my heart again, risking the pain I swore I'd never endure twice. And yet, when I thought of walking away, a different kind of pain settled in, the kind that comes from losing something before it has a chance to bloom. One night, I found myself standing by my window again, watching the rain fall against the glass. It reminded me of that storm, the night he appeared out of nowhere and wrapped me in his coat. I remembered the way his voice sounded in the chaos, steady and certain. "You're mine now." I had thought it was arrogance, but now I realized it was hope. It was him holding on to the one thing that felt real in his world. When I finally saw him again, he didn't ask for explanations. He just looked at me like he already knew my heart was torn. His silence was enough. It gave me the space to choose, not out of pressure, but out of truth. And I did choose. Not because he was a billionaire, not because he could offer me a life I'd never dreamed of, but because, for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone saw me, not the mask, not the struggle, not the scars, but me. Loving him wasn't easy, and I knew it never would be. But as he pulled me close that night, whispering against my hair, "I found you in the storm, and I'll never let you go again," I realized storms aren't meant to break us. They're meant to strip away the lies, the fears, the doubts, until only the truth remains. The storm had brought me to him, but it had also brought me back to myself, to the woman who still believed in love, who still dreamed, who still deserved more than survival. And as I held on to him, I knew this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a new one. One written not in loneliness or fear, but in love that had been tested by the storm and survived. If you've ever been caught in life's storm, wondering if love will ever find you, remember, sometimes destiny shows up when you least expect it. If you enjoyed my story, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more heartfelt tales, and share it with someone who believes in love even after heartbreak. Your support means the world and helps me bring more powerful stories your way. Until next time, never stop believing that love can rewrite your story, even on the stormiest night.